So on my way home today, I figure I just talk a little bit about this kind of recurring thought that has come up over the past couple days, uh, which is around how I compare myself to an ideal. I compare sort of things that I'm viewing on a day-to-day basis or where I'm at to an ideal that I have in my head rather than comparing myself from say a year ago or a few years ago or 6 months ago or whatever. And that thought tends to lead to the other thought of, well, part of the reason why I might compare myself to that ideal is that I've often associated work and productivity with the ideal of work, meaning with my own peak productivity. And the reason why I've associated work with my own peak productivity is because my my work style, especially when it comes to philosophy and writing and making these types of videos, sort of creative work in general. When it comes to creative work, I have, for most of my life, followed this kind of burst and then crash work style, where I get this burst of motivation or inspiration or an idea strikes me in a certain way. And that motivation leads me to create a bunch of work at once and to try to fill, almost every hour of my day with this kind of creative work. And then inevitably, that kind of work isn't sustainable. It doesn't match with a real lived kind of life. It doesn't make room for other things that are interesting to me that I want to do. It doesn't make room for leisure. And that leads to that pattern of work falling apart, disintegrating, and not really being functional. And then I get depressed or upset that I'm not able to sustain that high level of work and sort of just crash down to basically doing very little to nothing for maybe weeks at a time. And then again, I gravitate back towards those things which are meaningful to me. I get that sense of motivation to do more work. And then you have another cycle of this kind of this burst, right? And whenever you're able to do work based on that amount of motivation and inspiration, it's always you're in a flow state in a sense. You're highly motivated. The work comes easy. It's pleasurable, and you create a lot all at the same time. And I think because my historical pattern of work has been tied to this kind of peak performance, you might say, this peak kind of work when I was doing the creative work, that has reinforced this expectation that when I do creative work now, if it doesn't reflect that kind of peak state, then there's something wrong. There is something maybe wrong with me, right? Or maybe I'm not able to actually do creative work or something like. And I'll get frustrated with perhaps how slow the work is or how slow the work seems, right? Because of course that's part of it, that it's the perception that it's going slow. So anyway, that's been my pattern of work. And I think my expectations are tied to that kind of peak work as like that's work, right? If it's in the peak performance, then that's real work because that's really the only kind of work that I've done due to the structure of this peak or the structure of this burst and then crash kind of work style. But about say 5-ish months ago, around April, I started to really notice this pattern of work, and it was really interfering with what I was trying to do. And so I did a little bit of research and came up with a way of doing a sustainable amount of work on a day-to-day basis with really a structure of a minimum threshold that I could sustain every single day with the option to go further if I wanted to. And so over the course of 5 months, I've been essentially training myself on this new sustainable version of the work where every day isn't a peak day. In fact, the vast majority of days are not peak days. I'm not reading and writing and recording videos and street preaching for hours and hours and hours a day. Rather, some days I'll do it for, let's say, the full hour, and some days I'll only get the sort of 5 minutes, and it depends on the day, right? But every day I'm doing something, and the sort of immediate perception of that is that things are going too slow, right? The experience is like, oh, I've only done 5 minutes today, and that's too slow, right? I've only written 100 words today. That's too slow, and it's a misconception because probably if you compared the sustainable amount of work over time compared to the burst crash structure of work, I've either kept up with the actual same amount of output that I would have done, or else exceeded that in some way. It's hard to actually objectively measure it, right? Unless I was going to do a test, I guess. But it's really just the sense that I get that really the sustainable work does about as much over the long term as the burst crash structure does, if not more, while feeling more like an integrated part of my identity, sort of becoming more habitual, if that makes sense. But the day-to-day experience can be one of frustration and one of, oh, have I done enough? Am I progressing enough? And again, it's that me comparing my state of work to the ideal of peak performance. And so I'll just give you the example of today. And this is part of the reason why it was on my mind is that today I read the Bible, or 3 chapters of the Bible. I finished a devotional book that was frustrating to get through because I didn't really like it that all that much. But I got through the last 30 pages or so of this devotional book that I didn't very much like, and so just powered my way through it so that I could finish it. I then afterwards, was feeling you're really forcing yourself to read through this book. So you kind of feel strange, right? Because you have to use your willpower to kind of get through this book. The next thing was the writing, and I had absolutely no motivation to write, but I used my minimum of 5 minute standard. And I set a timer for 5 minutes and began to write. Got through the 5 minutes and thought, okay, well, I have a few more things to say that I could tolerate pushing through this, and wrote for another 10 minutes. So I wrote 15 minutes today, and the writing was a struggle. I was having I was drawing blanks. I was being very critical of other things I had written already, and I was having thoughts like, is this book really any good? Is it even worth continuing this anymore? Should I just scrap this entire project? So, I did the 15 minutes of writing with that kind of thought environment. But then I went on to record a video for YouTube about the reason of faith, which I spent, I think, 43 minutes recording myself, which is a significant chunk of time. And it was a tremendous struggle to get through. I felt my brain felt very foggy. I felt tired and lethargic. I really just struggled to talk about the topic, which I don't know if I've even articulated all that much out loud, at least not for that long, about faith and my faith. But I did it, recorded that, and then I went to the gym for 20 minutes. I did rowing for 20 minutes. The intention was to do 30 minutes, but I started to get a cramp in my leg around the 18-minute mark, and I didn't want to push through it, so I just did the 20 minutes of rowing, and it kind of sucked. It was hard, and I didn't really want to go to the gym in the first place. And then I came home and I went to work. And overall, pretty much everything that I did today that was a direct value based or creative work was frustrating to one extent or another. It was a struggle to do them and to complete them. And I had to do, in some senses, a minimum, or less than ideal, I guess you could say, right? Certainly less than the peak performance. And I've just been reflecting on it and thinking about how, that maybe that's not every day of work, but just because it was difficult to get through today doesn't mean it wasn't valuable work or didn't contribute to what I was doing. The creative work on some days, if not many days, can be one of struggle and of kind of pushing a little bit past your comfort zone, of just committing yourself to doing a little bit of the work that day and being okay with it being minimal, being okay with it being hard, being okay with it being, relatively unproductive that day compared to your goal. And that's actually the real process of creative work. The peak moments, the peak productivity where you can write for hours and it all just flows really well and it all seems to be great and you're having just a wonderful time doing it, which I've experienced numerous times in my life. But it doesn't. That's not what the creative work is all the time. Even when it comes to something that you genuinely value, that you're going out of your way to devote time to, even though you don't get paid and nobody's applauding you for it. The things that you go out of your way to commit your time to, even the work there, a lot of the times is a struggle. It's kind of just maybe getting through it that day. Today was definitely that kind of day. And I was reflecting on this because at the beginning when I got to work and was thinking about these things, I was disappointed with myself, right? I was disappointed that like, man, this is such a struggle and the writing was so bad today and the recording was so bad today and all I had to cut my exercise short and man, it was just such a frustrating day and it almost feels like a waste. And I had kind of had that negative mindset for a good chunk of my workday, and it was only at the end where I kind of turned it around and I realized, like, well, but you showed up. I mean, hey, maybe it wasn't peak performance, maybe it wasn't even mid performance today, but you showed up. I mean, you read the Bible, you read this devotional book, you pushed yourself through it. You got down and wrote for 15 minutes. You recorded for 43 minutes on a topic that's difficult for you to talk about that in a medium that you're still learning. You went to the gym and yeah, it was a struggle. Yeah, it was difficult, but you showed up and you actually had a very productive day. Compared to peak performance, is it great? No, but compared to, a year ago when you weren't even consistently working day to day, where, when things became frustrating, you just kind of gave up for a few couple weeks and came back to it later. And now, you have a sustainable structure of work that you can do day to day, that constantly daily making progress, even when it's really difficult and hard struggle. And you're committed enough to do it that even on days like this, when one thing after another is a pain, you still commit to doing some of it. I mean, in the long run, that's the kind of attitude, that's the exact kind of attitude that you want. That I should be actually proud of myself because I've got myself to a point that even on a crummy day, I still committed to the things that are important to me and put significant effort into them. And I shouldn't be disappointed in that because I'm comparing it to an ideal that I can't have all the time or I haven't reached yet, but I should be comparing it to, what I was doing a year ago. And in that sense, I think I've made a lot of progress and I should actually be proud of myself.